Why culture now rewards fakery over real substance. Something's not right. You feel it. I feel it. We all do. We scroll through our feeds, walk through airports, sit in classrooms, attend meetings, and there's this strange hollowness echoing beneath everything. Everyone's saying the right things, posting the right things, wearing the right things, smiling at the right times, nodding in agreement to whatever the current script demands. But deep down, you know most of it is fake. Almost no one believes what they're saying. And yet, those who play the game best, those who perform with the most polish and precision, are the ones who rise. They're the ones we reward, follow, promote, and imitate. So the question we must confront is this: why does our culture now reward fakery over real substance? Let's not sugarcoat it. We live in a time where authenticity is punished and performance is celebrated. People who speak truth are labeled difficult, problematic, or intense. People who question the narrative are considered threats. People who refuse to play along are left behind. Meanwhile, those who master the art of illusion, those who can say the most while meaning the least, become influencers, thought leaders, and public intellectuals. It's as if we've built a system where the mask gets more applause than the mind. And it didn't happen by accident.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
See, culture is a mirror. It reflects what we reward. And what we reward, in turn, shapes what people become. Somewhere along the way, we stopped rewarding depth. We stopped valuing patience, inner work, contemplation, truth-telling, and uncomfortable honesty. We replaced those things with something more efficient: image. We traded meaning for metrics, reality for relatability, wisdom for branding. And now we live in a world that's optimized not for truth, but for attention. You've probably felt this in your own life. Maybe you've watched someone get ahead in your field not because they were better, but because they were better at appearing better. Maybe you've seen people rise in your social circle simply by echoing the right opinions with just the right tone. Maybe you felt the pressure to tone yourself down, to play it safe, to wear a version of yourself that's more palatable. And you wonder, why is it that the more real I become, the more invisible I feel? It's because real substance is threatening. It's unpredictable. It doesn't always smile. It doesn't always say what's popular. And perhaps most importantly, it doesn't play by the rules of the algorithm. In a world where everything is designed to be consumed quickly, shared easily, and liked instantly, real thought becomes a liability. A person who thinks deeply is slow to speak, slow to react, slow to conform. That's not good for engagement. So what do? We silence them. Not always with force, but with indifference. We scroll past, we ignore, we unfollow. And slowly, the world becomes louder, but emptier. But how did we get here? Why did the culture shift in this direction? It begins with fear of being wrong, fear of standing alone, fear of being judged. And fear always seeks comfort in imitation. If everyone else is doing it, it must be right. So we copy. We mirror popular behaviors, beliefs, and aesthetics. It feels safe. It feels smart. But what started as survival becomes a sickness. We forget who we are. We stop asking hard questions. We stop demanding depth from others and from ourselves. And here's the real tragedy: we start to believe the performance. We begin to conflate visibility with value, virality with virtue, charisma with character. We stop distinguishing between someone who knows and someone who performs knowing. And that's when culture collapses into theater. Life becomes a stage, and we all become actors terrified of breaking character. But the soul can only be silenced for so long. Eventually it starts to whisper. It says, "This isn't it." It says, "There's something more." It says, "You're not here to pretend. You're here to live." And that whisper grows louder every time you betray your real self to fit in. Every time you laugh at a joke you don't find funny. Every time you stay silent when your conscience demands speech. Every time you choose applause over truth. So let's ask the hardest question of all. How much of your life is real? How much of what people admire in you is actually you, and how much is just a reflection of what they want to see? If you stripped away the filters, the followers, the accolades, and the applause, what would be left? Because that's where the truth is hiding, not in what you show, but in what you're afraid to show. Not in what you say, but in what you stop yourself from saying. Not in how others see you, but in how you see yourself when you're completely alone. And maybe that's the beginning of something. Maybe the first step toward reclaiming substance is to stop performing, even if it costs you something. Maybe the real power isn't in being seen, but in being real, even when no one's watching. The illusion economy, passe economy, or how we've monetized appearances and abandoned inner truth. We now exist inside an illusion economy, a system where the appearance of value often holds more weight than actual value, where aesthetic replaces ethics, branding replaces being, and performance replaces purpose. You don't need to be good anymore. You just need to look good. You don't need wisdom, you need a vibe. You don't need depth, you need reach. And slowly, invisibly, we've shifted from a world that rewards truth to one that rewards optics. The terrifying part. Most of us have accepted this shift without even realizing it. But think about it. We live in a time where it's possible to be famous for being famous, where people build entire livelihoods on curated personas that bear little resemblance to who they actually are, where words like authenticity and realness are used as marketing tools, not moral commitments. It's a strange paradox. The more fake the world becomes, the more it has to pretend it values being real. But when everything is a brand, even your personality, then even authenticity becomes just another costume. This is the trap. We've turned identity into currency. The self is now a product. Your opinions, your appearance, your tone of voice, your struggles, your joys, they're all marketable assets. And once something becomes monetized, it becomes performative. You start to ask not, "What do I believe?" but what will resonate, not "Who am I?" but what will sell. And with each post, each edit, each filtered truth, you drift a little further from yourself. Until one day you don't know if you're living your life or just managing your image. The illusion economy doesn't just operate online, it permeates everything. But in the corporate world, we reward those who polish their resumes better than they polish their character. In education, we emphasize grades over growth, test scores over curiosity. But even in activism, we sometimes prioritize optics over impact, statements over solutions. It's not that these things are inherently bad, but it's that when appearances become the goal, substance becomes optional. And when substance becomes optional, truth becomes disposable. But here's where it gets even darker. Because we've built this illusion economy, we now need it to survive. It's not just that we reward fakery, we become dependent on it. Platforms, profits, politics, they all run smoother when people are distracted by surfaces. When people are too busy optimizing their identity to notice that the systems they serve are hollow. When people are too caught up in their own performance to even question the script. The fakery isn't just rewarded, it's required to keep the machine running. And yet, deep down, we feel the cost. We feel it in the emptiness that lingers after every dopamine hit. We feel it in the anxiety that comes from constantly curating ourselves. We feel it in the quiet moments when we realize we're not sure who we are without the mask. Fakery might win applause, but it starves the soul. Because no matter how convincing the performance, the self knows when it's lying. So what do we do? How do we resist an economy that profits from our performance? The answer isn't easy. It starts with discomfort, with being willing to be misunderstood, with being willing to be boring, quiet, unmarketable, if that's what's real. It starts with reclaiming spaces where you're not performing, conversations without cameras, thoughts you don't tweet, moments where you don't filter your feelings for public approval. It starts with asking, if I couldn't monetize this moment, would I still choose it? Would I still say this? Would I still be this person? And maybe most importantly, it starts with seeing through the illusion, seeing that most of what we envy is a highlight reel, that most of what we compare ourselves to is a digital mask, that most of what we chase is a projection, not a person. When you begin to see the illusion for what it is, it loses its power. You stop trying to keep up and you start trying to go within. Because substance doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't trend. It lasts. It doesn't perform. It is. The death of depth. Why shallow minds rise and thinkers are forgotten. We are living in the age of shallow minds rising. Not just rising but dominating. They fill our screens, influence our decisions, and shape our culture. And ironically, the more superficial someone is, the more likely they are to be heard. It's not that people don't want truth anymore, it's that they want truth without discomfort. And the dangerous thing about depth is that it's always inconvenient. It makes people pause. It makes them question themselves. And in a world addicted to speed, questioning has become a kind of sin. Slowness is punished. Reflection is obsolete. So we elevate those who give us surface-level certainty, and we ignore those who offer hard-earned wisdom. It's not that thinkers no longer exist. It's that we've stopped listening to them. We don't hear them because they don't speak in sound bites. They don't simplify what is complex just to make it more palatable. They don't play the game of constant visibility. They spend more time thinking than performing. And in a culture that's optimized for performance, depth becomes invisible. We scroll right past it, not because it isn't valuable, but because we've trained our attention to prefer ease over truth. This is the death of depth, not in a literal sense, but in a cultural one. We've buried it beneath algorithms and fast takes. We've taught ourselves to treat thoughtfulness as indulgence and nuance as weakness. Instead of asking, is it true? We ask, is it trending? Instead of wondering, what does this mean? We ask, what does this look like? And slowly, our collective mind begins to rot. Not from ignorance, but from overload, from the constant stream of half ideas, shallow commentary, and pre-packaged beliefs. But here's the thing, depth takes time. It asks you to sit with complexity, to admit you don't know, to wrestle with uncomfortable truths that can't be resolved in a single post or video. It demands presence, and presence is in short supply when your attention is being auctioned off every second of the day. Most people don't abandon depth because they hate thinking. They abandon it because they're exhausted. And in that exhaustion, they reach for the nearest certainty, even if it's hollow. And this is where shallow minds thrive. They offer clarity without complication. They offer certainty without contradiction. They offer confidence without context. And we reward them not because they make us better, but because they make us feel better. But they give us enemies to hate, heroes to follow, slogans to chant. They offer us the illusion of understanding without the burden of introspection. And in doing so, they rob us of our intellectual sovereignty. So let's ask something hard. Have we become afraid of thinking? Not just thinking in the academic sense, but in the existential sense. The kind of thinking that unravels you, that forces you to confront your own inconsistencies, that asks you to rebuild your worldview from the ground up. Because if we're honest, we don't just avoid thinkers, we avoid thought itself. We fill our days with noise, not just because we're distracted, but because we're afraid of silence. Because silence invites us inward, and inward is where the real questions live. What if I've been wrong? What if my success is built on performance, not purpose? What if the people I admire are just better at pretending? What if my life is a well-curated illusion? Those are the questions depth demands. And those are the questions shallow culture can't afford to ask. Because when we start asking those things, the entire game begins to fall apart. The illusion economy crumbles. The fake personas dissolve. And all that remains is the raw, unfiltered truth of who we really are. And maybe that's why thinkers are forgotten. Not because they lack relevance, but because they pose a threat. A threat to the comfort of lies, the ease of conformity, the simplicity of shallow certainty. A threat to the systems that rely on us never thinking too deeply, never questioning too much, never waking up fully. But here's the beauty: depth doesn't need attention to survive. It survives in solitude, in late-night journals, in long walks without your phone, in books that demand rereading, in conversations that don't end in agreement, but in deeper curiosity. Depth is not loud, but it's alive. And if you listen closely beneath the noise, beyond the screens, you can still hear it breathing. Reclaiming reality: how to live with substance in a culture addicted to illusion. So now we're here at the edge of the illusion. We felt the emptiness of fakery. We've seen how the shallow rise while the deep are forgotten. We've watched the world trade truth for attention and authenticity for applause. But the question that remains the one that matters most is this: what do we do now? How do we reclaim reality when everything around us is designed to distract us from it? How do we live a life of substance in a culture that constantly seduces us with appearance? It starts with a choice, not a grand, cinematic transformation, but a quiet, radical commitment to stop lying to yourself. That's the first rebellion, because the illusion isn't just out there, it's inside us. It's in the little compromises we make every day, the truth we don't say, the silence we keep to stay liked, and the self we edit to fit in. Reclaiming reality doesn't begin with a viral moment. It begins when you decide that your inner alignment is worth more than any external reward. You have to reclaim your attention, not just from your phone or the news cycle, but from the false self that's always trying to perform for others. Every scroll, every like, every share, it's all part of a game that teaches you to value image over essence. But when you slow down, when you sit with yourself without distraction, you start to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. Reclaiming reality means building that relationship with yourself again. And that takes time, honesty, and the courage to be alone without being lonely. It also means relearning how to think. Not just what to think, but how. In a world of instant opinions and templated ideologies, independent thought is an endangered skill. But it's the only way to escape the illusion. You can't live with substance if you're outsourcing your worldview to whatever's trending. Read things that challenge you. Sit with ideas that make you uncomfortable. Talk to people who don't always agree with you. Not to win arguments, but to understand. Because understanding is what separates the real from the fake, and understanding takes work. You also have to surround yourself with people who value substance. That might mean losing some followers. It might mean walking away from relationships built on mutual performance. But it's worth it. Real connection, the kind that doesn't need filters, scripts, or performances, is rare. And when you find it, it nourishes you in a way that applause never could. Choose people who challenge you to be more you, not more like them. That's the difference between a mirror and a mask. And finally, you have to be willing to live a life that doesn't always look impressive. That might be the hardest part, because we've been trained to believe that a meaningful life must be visible, shareable, celebrated. But some of the most powerful lives are lived quietly. A father who shows up every day, even when no one thanks him. A woman who chooses truth over popularity. A young person who refuses to sell themselves for likes. These lives don't trend, but they matter. They ripple outward in quiet ways that no algorithm can track. So ask yourself, what would your life look like if no one could see it? Would you still do the work? Would you still speak the truth? Would you still be kind, curious, brave, true? That's the test. Because substance isn't about visibility, but it's about integrity. It's about being the person you know you are, even when no one's watching, and especially when they are. The culture may reward fakery now, but that won't last. Illusions collapse, trends fade, but truth endures. And those who live in truth, who anchor themselves in something deeper, become the still point in a spinning world. They become the rare ones who remind the rest of us what it means to be real. So let the world perform. Let it chase shadows. You choose substance. You choose reality. You choose to be.